My name is Kilkenny, the host of the Modern Mystic podcast. I am a psychic medium, astrologer, university professor of yoga and meditation with an online membership that you can join. I offer one on one psychic medium readings, astrology readings, as well as one on one coaching sessions as part of my Vibrant Venus coaching program that I love so much, which can be booked at modernmystic.love. Today, I am thrilled to have Marcy Mazurenko here. And she never imagined that she would become an energy healer, medium, and intuitive coach. After suffering from chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, the sudden passing of her parents, only 11 months apart, rocked her to the very foundation as she valiantly sought to restore and replenish her life energy, she turned inward to nurture her spiritual side, subsequently training in an array of different wellness modalities. Now, as a Reiki master, certified bioenergy healing practitioner, this powerful intuitive provides us with life guidance, clarity, and the invaluable insights to understand our own energy systems and intuitive gifts. Marcy, welcome to the Modern Mystic podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled and honored to be here.
Well, it's so great because our paths really just connected more recently. And a lot of my guests, it's been a long, circuitous road. But as things happen, all these universal forces conspired. And so it was so great to have you to come and share with everyone, what does it mean to you to be a modern mystic?
So to me, the word mystic is about magic. It's about the unseen, and a mystic is someone who understands that, who's in that awareness, who has that knowledge of all of the magic that we can't see, that we don't see. And the modern mystic is exactly that. Modern version of it. I think that, there's been times, in especially in our culture, where a mystic has, had a certain stereotype, and the modern mystic is us. They walk among us, they work with us, they play with us, they parent with us, and they are us.
Yeah, that's so great. And I think that's so true to just dispel and really normalize psychic abilities, mediumship, modern mysticism. I mean, obviously, that's the name of my podcast, and one of the main impetuses to have it. And it's so true because I know with myself, and I know you and I will probably share a lot about our journeys because I've just recently finally been sharing more publicly my own mediumship skills. And part of that, when I reflected on that, really is this stereotype, what we see in the media, what's portrayed, with people who have psychic abilities that is so ingrained and indoctrinated in our heads sometimes. Now, I've been, you know, commingling and interfacing with mystics my whole life, and therefore psychics, people with psychic energies, in the way of fluency and working with energy. And anytime I would go to a straight up psychic, a lot of people I grew up with were priestesses and shamans and yogis and monks and gurus and all these different people who had these abilities and so much more, frankly. But, when I would go and have conversation, just like periodically, they would come into my land and world, not formally when I was young, but they would always say to me, "Oh, Kilkenny, you're a psychic, you're a medium." And I remembered when I was younger thinking, "What are they talking about? Like what? Like there's that couldn't be possible because of all of the stereotypes that I saw as a child, how psychics are, that they would have a shingle and have like a small little room you'd go into, or like whatever it is from the Wizard of Oz, looking at the crystal ball, right? But as you said, first of all, and we'll dive really deeply into this, how our listeners can develop their own psychic abilities, because really everyone has that capacity. And also the idea that really people who are psychic and even mediums are all around us, because now that I'm fully claiming that world, so many people, of course, that I didn't even realize or I knew or whatever have these abilities too. So what was your journey like for yourself, realizing and stepping into your power and these abilities, which really help bring so much healing and really claim the magic and help others to do the same. That all of the magic and that their loved ones and all the things are really real.
So my journey was quite different than yours in terms of, I grew up on a farm. I was a very sure, we had that, that outdoorsy thing, and we grew our own plants and our own gardens and all of that, but it was more out of necessity than anything else. And so we were not a spiritual family. My parents went to church once in a while, but we didn't talk about anything, really God related or spirit related. And so I had experiences now, again, in reflection, knowing that all of my invisible friends were probably not invisible friends, and they were probably spirit, hanging out with me. Um, but it wasn't until, much, much, much later in adulthood where the mediumship ability really came forward. And part of that was my grief journey, because for me, mediumship and energy healing were such key pieces in my healing journey, in my grief journey, and being able to have that connection. So when I started doing energy healing, I found that, messages were starting to come to me, and I was, starting to receive some things. And of course, I didn't really understand it. I didn't trust it. So it took a lot more development. And of course, my beautiful, wonderful, fabulous ego was getting in the way a lot and saying, well, that's not really true. And so I had to, of course, develop that, release a lot of limiting beliefs, release some fears, and do a lot of work around all of that before I could fully kind of step into my role as a medium.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I honor and really have such compassion for you for what you shared in your bio about losing your parents so closely together. And I know for me personally, when I started to realize, and for me, it was during meditation, because I've been meditating since I was a child. And so I started having more and more expanded experiences of all sorts of mystical things in my meditation. And so that's where, like, I built that muscle. It really is, in my experience, like a muscle, like going to the gym. And I had just been going to the spiritual gym, hitting hard cardio my whole life. And so therefore, these experiences open up for you, not as the goal, but just as a natural byproduct of doing them daily. And when I started to consider what was happening to me, and even in my coaching work, sharing with my clients some of these downloads, which I've always had, but always translated them as just thoughts when I was working with people. So, like, when I had my studio, I'd get psychic downloads, but I would say, like, oh, like, I feel like maybe we should have this workshop, even though it was like a download saying, have this sound healing workshop, and then it would be sold out, things like that. So always, like, making it in layperson's terms. But when I started really having deeper experiences of giving directives to people in my one-on-one work, so many people at that moment were in a moment of facing and dealing with death. And that's when the light bulb came off, or went off for me, that this was definitely messages from the other side. And I think that a lot of people at that really, really hard moment that we all experience when we're facing someone else's death of someone close to us we love can be such a poignant, terribly sad, and yet almost sometimes an elation and an awakening moment too. Like it sounds like it was for you. So can you talk about that? How maybe it's the veil gets thinner, you felt like? What was your experience specifically, please, if that's feels comfortable to share?
Yeah, absolutely. And really, for me, what it boils down to is faith. And so I experienced a lot of loss, from the very beginning. As a small child, my one of our very good neighbors and my dad's best friend passed away, and then my mom's best friend passed away. My grandparents passed away when I was in junior high, and then when I was in high school, um, three very close friends of mine all passed away within a year, and one of them was to
Oh,
suicide. And
no.
so there was this compounding grief that I didn't realize, of course, at the time. And I didn't know how to deal with it. We didn't talk about it. My parents were quite emotionally unavailable, and so we just didn't talk about it. So much so, in fact, that when I went through this suicide experience with this close friend of mine, I actually learned that my dad's sister had committed suicide, but we had never
Uh,
talked about it before that point, and we never talked about it again. And so that just kind
mm,
of gives you an idea about, the conversations or lack of conversations we had about death and about grieving and about spirit and all of those things. And so, I think the more grief I experienced, the more loss I experienced, the less faith I had. And when I was newly married, my my brother-in-law passed away at the age of 39, and
mm,
3 months later, my father-in-law collapsed. And I remember very clearly following the ambulance to the hospital and going, he's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. God would not take, a father and a son from this family, just 3 months apart. But he didn't make it. And I lost all
mm,
faith. I lost all faith in everything. And I actually became consumed with death. I was scared of my own death. I was scared of everyone around me dying. Every time I picked up the phone, I was certain that it was, the report that somebody else had died. If somebody was a few minutes late coming home, I, panicked. This was before, cell phones and texting and knowing where everybody was at all times. And so I lost all of that faith until, and then of course my parents passed away. And when my mom passed away, I was in this space of, gratitude and appreciation of, the time that we spent together and the very, very close relationship that we had. And 11 months later, when my dad passed away, I was mad. I was angry. Again, I was like, why would God do this to me? This isn't fair. And I got into this very deep, dark space. And
yeah.
so the turning point for me was actually a story about my grandmother. And we were about to celebrate her 100th birthday. She was a
Amazing.
phenomenal lady, phenomenal, phenomenal woman, always has been my hero. And my sister told me this story about how she overheard someone talking to my grandmother at my dad's funeral. So my grandmother had just buried her fourth of five children. She
Oh,
had, earlier buried a spouse. She had buried most of her eight siblings,
mm,
friends. She was 96 years old at the time. And somebody approached her at the lunch after at the funeral and said, Mary, how are you doing? And she shrugged in her cute little way and said, I'm okay. What choice do I have? And so that really, lit the spark in me, because I went, wow, if my grandmother at 100 years old can, live through what she lived through, the depression, raising kids, clearing the land, doing all of the things, losing all of these people and still be okay, then I could be too. And that really started my journey, of discovering mediumship, of stepping in. And one of the first things I did was take this course, and I learned about, choosing a sign from our loved ones. And that was where my faith started to get kind of reestablished, because I did start asking for signs and I got them.
yeah.
And it was
That's
like,
amazing. Tell us about that. Yeah, would you to talk about how we can do that? And I so honor that journey and
mhm.
how beautiful it led you to at first the questioning and even the lack of faith. Because I feel like with death, it's a road that diverges, like two roads diverge in vacant wood, like the poet says. And I took the one less traveled by. And you can take the one of anger and those are all natural normal feelings and despair, and we have to go through those feelings, but you can land in the place of no faith, or you can go through all of the dark night of the soul feelings and then land in the place of more faith like you ultimately did. So beautiful. So yeah, how can people ask for signs? And because that's so big, I'm such a fan.
It's huge, and really that's all it is establishing what that sign is. And some people already know, they see the feathers, they see the dimes, they see the pennies, whatever it is. For me, I asked my parents very clearly. I said, when I need to hear from you, when I need a sign, when I need to know you're nearby, send me a dragonfly. And so the first time this happened, I was considering becoming a bioenergy healing practitioner. And, of course, the ego was like, well, you can't afford it and you can't do this and it's not good and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, but it just felt so right. And so I said, Mom and Dad, if this is something that I'm supposed to do, send me a dragonfly. And so I was driving home from work one day. I asked the question and I drove through a swarm of dragonflies. And my ego said,
Amazing.
well, that's kind of cool, but like there's a swamp there and there's always dragonflies and it's just the time of day and the time of year and yada yada yada. So I dismissed it. And later that night we were, sitting around and one of my kids said to me, "Mom, why is there a dragonfly on the wall?" And I looked over and sure enough there was a dragonfly sitting on the wall. Have no idea how it got in the house. We left it there, never saw it again. Have no idea how it got out or where it went. But then I knew that was the sign. And continuing that journey and learning more about our own journey and how our souls come into this lifetime, how our souls exit this lifetime, has given me probably more faith than I've ever had and more understanding and a completely unbelievably different perspective of death.
So why don't you talk about that? What is your belief and understanding of that? Of how souls come in, of how souls leave, and let's talk about that together a bit, huh?
Sure. So I have this understanding that, we of course come into this lifetime for a reason. We incarnate for all of the things that we need to learn, all of the lessons that we need to learn. Maybe there's karmic debt to be paid. But really, when we come into this lifetime, we sign a contract, a soul contract. And we say, this is what we're going to do. This is who we're going to be. This is the family I choose to be with. And this is when and where I'm exiting and how. And that understanding for me, knowing that everything happens for a reason, knowing that everyone has their own journey, because I look at things even in terms of health, and I often wonder, well, how come that person survived the exact same disease that this person didn't? And so there's so much more the mystical, the magic that we can't see and understand that gives me a faith and understanding that that this lifetime plays out the way exactly the way it's supposed to.
Exactly, yes. And when you're a psychic medium, like both of us are, then you can get these messages. These people who have crossed and that are now spirit, they're not any different in the way that they still hold on to their personalities, right? Like they come to me and they'll still be persnickety, or they'll still be, whatever, angry, or they'll still be whimsical and witty, And when I receive messages and I'm channeling them for people, the reason they do that is because then your sitter, the person you're serving, can recognize them, but they are in the space of their highest self. They no longer hold grudges. They can see how they were, right? Because as Marcy said so eloquently, they came here, like we all did, to learn some very specific lessons. And whether they learn them or not learn them, once they leave this plane and they leave their physical bodies, they remember all the above. And so it's so incredible. And I always say the soul has a goal, right? The soul has a goal, and there are these contracts, like Marcy said, and they know about them and they can tell mediums about them, why they had to go at a certain time. And, there's also another interesting component, because it is an interesting thing to think about the free will versus contract. In my understanding and experience, some beings came here and they had a definite specific expiration date. It was like ahead of time, they were going to go out. And then some beings come here and it's called death doors. They have some windows and opportunities to go, and they get to decide, because we do have free will, of course. And I think a lot of people actually have that. A lot of people come into this lifetime and I find actually people who have developed their psychic mediumship and tend to be people who actually have more of those, in my experience, more opportunities, sometimes more exits that they could have taken. But that's my humble opinion. However, this is the thing, and so bottom line is that there really is this divine order and this plan and this really overarching architecture and infrastructure that's here to to really support all of us. And the truth is that often when I'm doing mediumship work, the people who have passed can then relay some of why they had to go. And so often, in people's absence, on the other side, they actually teach the people still embodied and living some of the greatest lessons, right? So do you find that as well? Like it's like in their absence, even though they're not absent, right? You can ask them for signs, you can ask them for help, but in their tangible, gross material absence, there's so much to be learned. And it really helps the people still here to grow by leaps and bounds, don't you think?
Absolutely, to grow and to heal. I've seen so often where, the soul has crossed over and has to do some healing on the other side because maybe they didn't learn the lessons, or maybe there was more that they needed to experience. And at the same time, their loved one who is still on this plane is healing and learning alongside them. So it's like they're
Mm,
progressing faster, than they would have if that person hadn't crossed. And so there's this like dualism of that healing process that is just so beautiful and magical because it's in these different realms but happening simultaneously.
yeah, such a good point. And sometimes in a session, I've had people who cross over thank the living person for their prayers, for their love, for their thoughts, because as you stated so beautifully, the person's living thoughts, prayers, love that they're directing towards the people who cross already has actually helped them. So it's not just that they can help us, of course they can, and people and listeners hear that. You can ask them for support. The second you think of your loved one and you say their name and you ask them to come, pretty much guaranteed they're there. They're around us so much of the time. And so we can really, really call on them when we're going through hard times, and know when we're going through really easeful, positive times that they're there celebrating with us too, right? They see all of it. And yet we can also give blessing and prayers because they're still in a dimension, they're still healing and they're still on a journey. It's no longer physical, but they are healing. So often I'll have people come and want a reading soon after someone passes. And that's a tricky thing because that's often, I find, a time where the soul actually goes into like a sabbatical, and they have to go and like heal. So that is a time for those listeners curious that sometimes like they'll show up at their funeral or they'll be around, I think for a while because they're trying to take care of the people who they've left and they know they're suffering so badly. But then they often do a little hiatus and they go into their own healing. They have a life review and they go into their own healing process for whatever they needed to heal from this lifetime. And so sometimes they're not available right away. And sometimes the sitter, I feel like, is in such mourning, they're not ready. So that's another interesting thing to talk about. Like, do you have that kind of rule too, to not always read people if it's really soon after a passing? How do you feel about that?
Well, I did. I did have that rule until I had an acquaintance come to me and say, I just lost my boyfriend of 8 years, and I'd really like to connect with him. And so I went through the whole thing. I went through the whole, well, it takes some time to cross over, and, the whole about the hiatus and the life review. And she said, no, 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 no. He's here. We've seen the signs. We know he's here. Can you please come and do a reading for our family? And so
Yeah.
I did. And it was, maybe 2 or 3 weeks after he had passed and he had taken his own life, so it was very tragic.
Mm,
And
mm,
yet he was probably one of the most strongest spirits that I've ever felt and that I've ever connected with. And the messages he brought were, you know, unbelievable, and a lot of the healing messages that you would expect, but other completely random, very tactile, very logical things that came through. And so sometimes we don't know as mediums, and we don't know as loved ones how long that kind of sabbatical is. For some people it could be months and months. For others it could be short. And to me, the way I kind of understand it, interpret it, my perspective is that it has a lot to do with where they are on their journey in this, what I call kind of God's school of angels. So sometimes maybe they're an old soul and they've done this thousands of times, so it's easy for them.
totally.
Sometimes,
Totally.
they have more to do on the other side, and so that takes a little bit longer. And of course, we have to keep in mind that there is no time on the other side. So we're the only ones who know what that is in terms of days or months or years.
It's such a good point, because in on the other side, it is not restricted by time and space. So there literally is no time. That's why sometimes, like, as a medium, like, spirits will show up, or you're hearing things, and I'll get downloads, and I'm in the bathroom, and I've had to learn, just like I've had to learn in life. I think it's very similar. The lessons I've had to learn with my people in my own life are exactly the lessons I've had to learn when I'm dealing with mediumship and spirit, which is to set really good, clear, healthy boundaries. So maybe we can talk about that. But one of them is like, okay, not in the bathroom. No one, okay, people don't come in my bathroom, whether you're in a body and in a not body, right? You have to, as a translator of energy, because they don't understand time. They don't really care about bathrooms and space. They don't, it's not linear. They truly don't abide by those laws, because where they are, they don't exist. And so it's a really great point. And totally, that I've had the same experience where, like, someone's crossed very quickly and they come, and again, the time's not really existing where they are. So it's like, is it, if they come, I know it's time, but that also is to share with people that there really can be a benefit to waiting till you're through your grieving process, and also waiting to give them a little space, because often that can create a lot of, harmony, because there's perspective, there's been some healing. But sometimes, the healing has to happen right away, and so spirit can orchestrate all that. But other times, I say that too, because a client will come and they want one person to come, and that person might not be available, but then all these other ancestors and people show up. And so it might be then that spirit's just having their little sabbatical time, right? But isn't it true, you just never know who's going to show up in a reading? Do you want to talk about that a little bit? It's pretty wild.
Yeah, absolutely. You never know who's going to show up, and you never know what they're going to say, what their messages are, what their signs are, any of that. And we have to be prepared for that as mediums, and we need to be prepared for that as sitters, because once we open the door, it could be any member of your spirit team. We're talking about connecting with the unseen, connecting with those higher vibrations of energy that are no longer bound by a physical body. That could be loved ones who have passed. That could be angels. It could be spirit guides. It could be a lot of different types of energy. And so I always set the intention that, I want to connect with the highest vibrational energies that are coming forward with messages in my client's highest and greatest good. And that's not for me to decide. That's not for my client to decide. That's for the spirit team to decide who's coming through and what those messages are. And sometimes it is who the sitter least expects it, and sometimes it's exactly who they expect. So we don't have any control over that, unfortunately.
No control. We're just the messengers. And I love what you said, because it's such an important point, that if you go out and seek support and getting a psychic medium reading, and let's talk about, actually, in a minute, the difference, because there is a difference between being psychic and being a psychic medium. So let's actually delineate that in a moment. But like anything, whether you get a doctor, whether you take your car to an auto mechanic, right? You want to go to someone that you know is in alignment with you and is excellent, because there's the gamut, and you have to be protective. This is such a vulnerable kind of situation. You put your heart, you put your soul, you put your mind, into someone's hands, trusting with this kind of tender, poignant information, and you really make yourself very susceptible and vulnerable. So it's so important to get a recommendation of someone, and to really do that background checking, because it's very, very tender, vulnerable, arena. And you want to be working with someone who is only delivering messages for your highest good and connecting in that way, and not delivering fear messages. Because for sure in my life, like, I've had someone deliver me some fear messages, and that's really intense. That's like a real, I want to call it for what it is. I think it's a vexing. And I've had clients come to me and they've been vexed. And when I say vexed, it's like, you can go to a doctor, and if they start talking about, oh well, cancer, 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 That's a type of vexing. They call this in shamanism, and I learned this from a wonderful now shaman, how the ears take in information, and the words carry energy, and so they leave an imprint, even if it's just talking about considering this might happen. So we have to be really, again, it comes back to boundaries, clear on who and what we let into our space, and even with their words, because they can really, really affect us. So yeah, can you talk a little bit about the difference between being psychic and then being a psychic medium, and how that will be relevant in all our listeners' lives?
Sure. I mean, I could try. To me, a psychic is someone who, very typically, I guess, sees the future. That's what the psychic is known for. And so they have this ability to, predict those things, to see how that plays out. Whereas psychic medium is, again, connecting with higher vibrational energies, other realms of consciousness, and a psychic is doing that as well, but in a very different kind of way and with a very different result. So as a psychic medium, I'm bringing messages directly to you from someone on your spirit team, where a psychic medium might be looking to that spirit team for guidance as to what the blueprint is, that you may follow. And so the caveat around all of that is that, like you said earlier, there's free will. And so whether, people will say, well, I went to the psychic and they didn't know what they were talking about because that's not how things played out. But what choices did you make along the way? So, and again, and you're right about finding someone that you can trust, finding someone, that you align with. And what I always tell people is follow your own intuition in that. Ask again for the sign from the universe, ask for the sign from your loved ones. If this is the person, or this is, the company, or this is the psychic medium, or this is the intuitive that you should be connecting with, send me a sign. It's never a
Yes.
coincidence that that person
Yes.
has come up on your feed, or has, connected with you, or you've seen their name several times. There's no coincidence in that. So follow your own intuition.
I love that so much. Yes. Ask for signs to go see whoever. I mean, a psychic medium or a doctor, or for all the things. You can be getting guidance for all these things. And so, yes, like all of you listeners, you are all psychic, meaning you have that capacity and that potential. That is my experience and belief, that anyone can develop their psychic abilities. And like Marcy said, it has to do with a lot of sensing past, present, future um, information, and tuning into your inner GPS is how I like to call it. Your gut. It's your gut. When people say follow your gut, right? Should I go left? Should I go right? So you can start to practice with really tiny things, really insignificant things. Don't make it the huge things if you feel like you haven't worked in this kind of way, or you're not as quote unquote facile and good at this kind of work. Little things. Should I have a chai latte or should I have a matcha latte? And just start to feel into your own body, and your body can even be this incredible tool, which it is. And you can even, close your eyes and feel like, okay, pick something that I know is a yes. Like for me, like my dog, she's such a yes, my pets, my cat. So I think of them, and then I think about, okay, where do I feel them when I think of them, and breathe in my body. And then you can do the same thing with something that you know within your heart. It's just an absolute no, like something you never do, that's something that repulses you. Close your eyes and breathe and feel where that is in your body. And then you can start to even, make decisions based off of, okay, should I have this tea? And then feel where it lands in your body, and practice that way. So there's so many little hacks and tricks. But again, it's like a muscle you can develop. So even the most, you know, least seemingly intuitive person still, in my belief, has this ability. I work with people all the time to help them, and I know you do too, Marcy. And then psychic mediumship, just like you said, Marcy, which was great, is that's your translator of energy. So I think of psychic abilities as like, if I'm focusing on a client in a reading, I'm focusing on them. I might see their aura, I might sense things about their chakras, whatever. We're getting information about the person. And then psychic mediumship is about actually getting information from elsewhere and delivering, being the messenger, so to speak, the translator for and to that person. And so, if you're a psychic medium, you have psychic abilities for sure. That's inevitable, they're inextricable. Many people are psychic because truly everyone has that potential and are not psychic mediums. So, that's the download on that. Let's talk about other tips. What are some other strategies like that you do with your clients or that you've done with yourself that are things that people can do in the way of our listeners to help them build that psychic muscle?
Well, I love that you talked about, choosing the tea and leaning into that. One of the tips and tricks that I like to recommend to people is lean into the route that you're taking to. So whether you're going to work or the grocery store or going home from the day, and so often we get this intuitive hit that tells us we should go the other way today. And we don't, and we get stuck in traffic, or we get stopped for speeding, or there's some other kind of minor catastrophe that happens. So I tell people, listen to your intuition and ask, like, which way should I go? And follow that and see what the experience is, knowing that you'll hear later on the radio that there is, a collision at the intersection that you were thinking, the other way, the other alternative. And so that's another way that you can practice this intuition and this ability to like tap into that and listen to those messages. It's a way to lean into that. Part of listening to the intuition and developing any type of psychic or psychic mediumship ability is to quiet the mind, and that's our biggest challenge.
Yes. Yes, it's so important. And so, meditation, like I said, that was my way in. And part of the reason why I kept resisting this work, there were many reasons. So part of it was my ego too. So let's go there next. Let's bookmark that part because I think that's really big. But part of it was too, I kept thinking, but I don't have a lot of experience with death the way other people have, like yourself. Like, I haven't had many, many physical deaths in this lifetime. And so I kept like having a feeling like, well, I don't really want to be like focusing on death. And I didn't really want to, and I don't really have a lot of experience with death, to help people. And so I had a resistance about that. Bonnie Worth, who's a fabulous psychic medium, who's I just honor so much. She was a guest on this podcast, so you can go back and listen to her episode, which is so much about her life and her journey. She was the one, she looked at my astrology chart and she's like, oh, okay, little Miss Psychic Medium, because I have Pluto sitting right on my sun, which is highly unusual. Like, the chances of that are like you could win the lottery more than that. It's a very unusual um, conjunction. And it's all about death and transformation. And it wasn't until I started really contemplating death in all realms, how every day we deal with little deaths, and how I've had, obviously, like everyone, so many deaths and intense near death. Frankly, I've had a lot of near death experiences, and how that was a part of the healing work is just really being present to and breathing with death. And when we meditate, we go into that space and we go towards that space of practicing presence, and whatever shows up. And when we develop that skill of practicing life as it is, not trying to change it, that's also a beautiful training ground so that then when death arises, we can be more in that space, right? So it's something that is really interesting to think about. What are all the deaths, if you're listening, that you have faced in your life? And when you've been brave enough to look at them and think about them, what have they taught you? I'm wondering with the ego, because I know myself, like for so long, I was sharing these downloads and my coaching and all this. But to actually say and claim, like, okay, yes, I'm a psychic medium, even to this day, like it's still very new. And I laugh and I feel there's a part of myself that feels self conscious about that. And I really do think it's so much the ego. For me, it's I don't want to sound egoic. Like, I don't want to sound like my ego's inflated. If you're like, oh, I'm a psychic medium, right? There's that wanting to keep humility. And then there's also, like, for me, it was not seeming intellectual enough. Like, I have studied for so many years. I'm a professor. Good God, to say you're a psychic medium, all of a sudden it puts you potentially in a stratosphere where people all of a sudden aren't taking you very seriously in the ways that you're serious. And I am a serious person, and I've always taken my work really seriously, and I'm a very intense person because Pluto's on my sun. So that was a big coming to terms with, and just realizing that, okay, this chose me, I didn't chose it, but it's something that I can do, and so I guess I'm really meant to share. Have you danced with that with your ego, and in what ways have you considered that, and has how that has played out for you?
Oh my gosh, the ego has been a huge battle for me. You know, I grew up in this home where my parents were not only emotionally unavailable, but they, you know, created this quite extreme fear of failure because there was always someone better, and there was always someone doing something different, and there was, you know, judgment all the time around people, around places, around experiences. We lived in a very small community. So you know, the dinner table conversation was about who we were judging at that time. And
Mm,
that's what I understood. That's what I knew. And so when you step into, you know, the modern mysticism of all of these things, really it's about removing that, and it's about removing these, you know, these stereotypes and these misconceptions about what a psychic medium looks like. And, you know, like I said, they walk among us, you know. And I tell people too that just because you are a psychic medium doesn't mean that you need to offer, you know, readings for a charge. But understanding what that means for you in your lifetime can give you this knowledge and this awareness that helps you on your path. And so the ego is always, you know, it's about balancing that ego and being able to maintain or eliminate the fear around judgment, the fear around failure, the fear around being wrong, the fear around, well, what if I say the wrong thing? You know, I love that you talked about, you know, death and how your ego convinced you that you don't have enough experience in death. But think about your experience in transition, think about your experience in transformation, and that's really what death is. We, again, our ego has created this idea that death is something forbidden. First of all, we shouldn't talk about dying, we shouldn't talk about death, we shouldn't talk about grief, we shouldn't talk about bereavement, right? all of the things
totally.
all of the things that we need to talk about, but yet we celebrate transformation, we celebrate transition. And when physical
And Marcy, you just broke up a little bit. And when what? Can you mind repeating that, please? Because I can tell it's so good.
I just said, and when our physical body dies, that's exactly what's happening. It's transformation, it's transition.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love that. So well put. And that's what Pluto is. For those friends who are astrology buffs and lovers, Pluto is all about alchemization, transformation. And that's so, I'm just, yeah, that's what all I'm about. So yeah, I love what you said about that. And just, it's so true when you're receiving information, whether it's psychic information, which again, everyone is receiving, or the psychic medium information, just letting the ego sit in the passenger seat and just what it okay, just let it come through. What, oh, I saw, I keep seeing eagles. I had a client recently, eagle, eagle, eagle. Okay, what does eagle mean? What does eagle mean to me? What is, look up eagle totem, right? It's all of the patterns, because the universe is continually trying to deliver us messages, and they might be from your spirit team, they might be from your ancestors, they might be from, fill in the blank, but regardless, it's pure positive energy that is speaking to you and acting like a sail and a raft. And if you choose to look towards it and explore it, you've got this incredible buoyancy and support at your wake. And so it's just such an amazing thing. And it's such a practical thing. I know for most people it sounds so out there, right? But if you're listening, take us as a sign. You have a huge team. If Marcy and I were sitting with you doing a call, we would be able to connect with all these beings who are literally cheering you on. Even more than that, who are trying to give you support to help you reach your goals, to help you learn the most and your soul's goal in this lifetime. And this is a truth. This is an irrefutable truth. And so, yeah, there's just so many things to talk about. Let's talk a little bit though about the realms, because I know you and I talked about that, and even in our conversation, you helped clarify that for me because it's something that with my practice of meditating, in meditation, you're elevating your energy, just for the listeners. So we all vibrate, right? We're all energy beings. This has been proven scientifically in the Western field. This isn't just like out there, Eastern theory or something. It's proven we're energy beings. And so we all vibrate, and this is proven too at a certain rate. And so the higher we can vibrate and the higher we can up level our vibration, we get closer to messages because the realms of spirit and, you know, light consciousness and God, goddess, whatever you want to call it, vibrates at a very high level. And so when we meditate, if we even just meditate 3 to 5 minutes a day, you're raising your vibration in a consistent way and you're getting closer and even merging with spirit and your guides and your team. And so yeah, I guess where was I going with that? I'm trying to remember. Oh, seven realms of consciousness. Thank you. So, can you talk about that? Because for a long time, I was traveling in all the realms, and I knew I was going to lots of cool places in my meditation because I just kept raising my vibration just because that's my practice. But to have a cohesive architecture, I think, is really, really helpful. And of course, some people have access to one of these realms or a couple of these realms. So let's talk about that, please. And would you elucidate that for our listeners?
Sure. And this is, really, I have to give credit to the incredible Bonnie Worth, who introduced me to these realms of consciousness, and has been a key, such a huge mentor for me, and such a huge teacher, and helping me to understand these things. And one of the things that I recognized very early is that you're absolutely right. Not everybody accesses the same realms of consciousness. And so, for example, and we use 7, other people use 12. For me, everything's about 7. But if we're on the third realm of consciousness and our loved ones who have passed are on the fourth, and the angels and archangels are on the fifth, I've experienced people who had a really hard time developing their their gifts to connect with that fourth realm of consciousness, but yet when they stepped into the fifth, it was an immediate connection.
Yeah. Let's even start. Let's break it down because you and I are already fluent. So for people who've like never heard this, I like to call it the 7 steps of consciousness. The first realm or step is what? Fill in the blank. And then let's talk about each one. Because a lot of people, this is deep, advanced kind of energetic architecture blueprint stuff we're talking. So what's number one, please?
So for me, number one is, that the crystals, the minerals, all of that really, juicy things for those of us who, again, who meditate and go into kind of the depths of the earth, right? And you see that crystal cavern and you experience it. To me, that's the first kind of realm of consciousness and the first step in the stairway.
Yay. So yeah, people. So like the soil and yeah, they're the people listening who love their rocks and their stones. Right now I work with I love all 7 realms. I've got my obsidian and my firestone and their intentions, put in those that have to do with their properties. And I hold one when I'm trying to focus the firestone and I hold one for protection, right? And so we can put these rocks and crystals into our pockets and into our lives and the different rooms in our house where we're trying to manifest different things, etc. So they're alive energies. They hold intention. Make sure people that you're activating them. My modern mystic members, I gave them a video about how to activate your rocks and crystals and gems. So if you want to become a member and learn about that, but that's working with that first step. Well done. Okay, what's the second, please? This is fun.
Well, I think there's different perspectives and different, interpretations. For me, the second step is kind of like the unseen earthly beings. So, this might be the fairies, it might be the things that, um that are on the earthly plane, but we can't really see them. There's a lot of kind of fun energy, but earthly energy, that's what's on the second realm for me.
I love that. Well, the first time you and I met in this lifetime, at least, you were like to me, "Oh, you're a fairy," and I remember being like, "What?" Like, and it's so funny because I had just been to modern day Avalon, which is Glastonbury, England. I have Irish, ancestry, but I had just the month before been into they call it the land of the Fae, and there everyone talks fairy everything. Like the first night I got there, there was a fairy ball. The next day there was like a fairy festival, and I went. I was attending a retreat, but I went to this festival briefly, and I walk in. There's all these artisans, and they're like these huge, very quote unquote masculine looking motorcycle guys with their Harley jackets, and then they all have wings, like little wings behind. And this is normal there. Like the cab driver, everyone, the Uber driver, they talk about the Fae. Yeah, it's just the Fae, and that's when even went to Ireland many years ago. I love like even the non-believers in anything still acknowledge that they're Fae. Like that's irrefutable to them that they're these fairies in the trees, this liminal space. And so, but it's so funny because when you and I met, you're like, oh, you have access to the second realm. And then you were like, oh, no, you actually are of the second realm. And I was like, what? Like, you blew my mind. I was like, because I just had never been focused as much as I have this background, but I've never been that kid who loved fairies or fairy, anything. And then, of course, once you said that, fairy has been just infiltrating me constantly now. So you were so accurate. And now all of a sudden, just I'm bombarded with fairy images and fairy everything. So it's so fun. And yeah, the fairy realm and the realm, like you said, it's in the earth. So there's an earth element, big time, but it's like earth and air is how I think of it, even.
Mm,
It's earth air beings because they fly
yeah.
too. And I've been there in meditation, and yeah, it's real. Okay, number three.
So three is the very earthly realm, the very, the very physical realm that we see, that we touch, that we are. So, humans, animals, all of those fun things. And this is where, a lot of people, this is where their gift is communicating with animals, is communicating with the, other people that, on an intuitive level.
Yeah. Third realm is we're three dimension, baby, where we are, and like you said, the animals and the higher self. The ethereal, that there's our higher self, and that wisdom body. The self that when we go to sleep reports back to us our dreams. In the yoga land, they call that the Atman. So beautiful. Okay, number four.
Four is what we would call, heaven. This is where our loved ones in this lifetime who have passed, where they exist, where we feel their energy, where we connect with them.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's why they're so accessible to us, right? Like as a medium, like when I started doing psychic mediumship, it was like, well, yeah, they're right there. And even different times like I've had in my life where I'll say something to someone close to me, my best friend, you know, and that's when it really started dawning on me. Like, oh, I was seeing certain things, hearing certain things, and it was like, oh, not everyone hears those things sometimes, or not everyone sees people who may not be really be people, but you're not sure, but they're a stranger. And so if you're wondering, like, and that's a great let's go there next. I love our conversation. I don't have this often with people where it's like, okay, I already know the next thing I want to talk about while I'm saying this thing because I'm so excited. So let's talk about that next after we get through the realms. Like, how do you know actually if you have some psychic mediumship abilities? We all have psychic abilities. But back to the fourth realm, quote unquote heaven, or in the yoga tradition, it's called Siddha Loka, that the fourth realm is so close to it's sitting on top of the third. And so that's why it's just literally, nano inches away.
Mhm, absolutely.
So
Somebody
beautiful.
explained it to me one time that, this heaven that we speak of is just beyond our own aura. So, we think of it as being so distant and so, far away, but really it is. It's just beyond our own energy.
Exactly. Because time and space, just circling back to that reality, and I know it's such a hard thought to get your human mind around, but time doesn't exist. Spirit will come to you at all times of day. Dead people will come all times of day and night because they don't have time. Sometimes they'll give messages in a reading that will be about the future. And then you say it to the sitter, and they say, no, that doesn't really resonate. And then 2 weeks later, they call you and they go, oh my God, that happened. Or oh, now I get what they were talking about because it happened to me. Because they don't, time, time is happening all at once for them. And the same thing with space. So I love what you just said, because you're referring to, right, space in a certain sense. It's a rule that doesn't exist in that realm, just our third realm. So cool. What about the fifth realm?
The fifth realm would be, the angels, especially the archangels. So to me, these are people, or these are, energies that have been on this journey. They've graduated to, from angel school. They've lived their human lives, and now they're in this, higher realm of consciousness where they've been assigned either as an archangel, as a guardian angel, or what, again, this higher vibrational energy. Maybe they're teaching other angels. There's all kinds of things that I've seen in this realm.
Right. It's the wise beings. Like they say in the yoga tradition, there's a word, it's called sadhus, like people who incarnate just to advahood is the actual real Sanskrit term. People who literally are already quote unquote in the state of self-realization, in the state of, supreme consciousness, God, goddess, and Buddha state all the time. And they don't have to come back and learn any more lessons, but out of their own compassion, they come back and they take a body to help elevate others. And that's those people right in the fifth realm. So all the sacred masters, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, right? That fifth realm. So juicy. I love that fifth realm. Thinking about the fifth realm. Okay, what about the sixth?
The sixth is the laws of the universe, some which are, easily explained, others are not. And it's also where our
Mm-hmm.
Akashic records are stored. So, that's kind of our library of our soul. That's also found in the sixth realm.
I love that, and you do great Akashic readings. So talk to people, because it's kind of a buzzword these days, and not everyone who's listening will understand what that means. So can you go into that a little bit more, Akashic record readings? Because I love them, and we can access these ourselves in meditations. But talk about that more, because you do such beautiful guidance with those.
Yeah, absolutely. The Akashic record readings are exactly that. It's asking permission to go into your record, and again tapping into that energy, seeing what you need to see that's in your highest and greatest good. So sometimes, or often, I find that a lot of those readings come with, an explanation of what happened in a past life. And again, for many of us that step into this work, we see those witch wounds, we see those scars, we see those things that we had to experience, and we understand where some of our fears are coming from that we brought forward into this lifetime. So those records kind of show some of that. They might also show, where your path is. They might also bring in, loved ones who have passed, or other energies to bring you messages as well. So it's like this all encompassing reading from a lot of the different realms. Actually, it's very cool.
Yeah, because there's a record, right? I mean, every lifetime you have lived, every moment within that lifetime, there is a record of. There are receipts, people. So you know, the Akashic record readings are amazing, because then it's almost like an audit. You have like it's a funny analogy I never thought of before, but you could get audited and you can access any lifetime. I've done past life regression meditations and had incredible experiences. And if you've ever had the feeling like when you're traveling, like, oh, I've been here before, trust that feeling, because if you think it, you have, right?
Mhm.
And you are tapping into the Akashic records. There's a record that you were there before, and right, so you are feeling that sixth realm, correct?
Absolutely. And if anyone's interested in past life stuff and are a little bit, hesitant or a little bit skeptical, read the book Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss. It is a phenomenal read, about past
Phenomenal.
lives, and there is absolutely no denying that they exist when you've read that book.
I love it. I love it. Yes, that's an amazing book. Thank you for sharing that, because I'm such a fan of sharing information. And you're right. Read that book and pay attention to that deja vu feeling, and even your interests, like someone who like loves Indian food and loves Indian culture, for sure me. I'm sure I know I have, because I've seen it in meditation. I've just seen it in my past life regressions. But when we have those propensities and interests that are unexplainable because they weren't from our family of origin, for sure they're connected to a past life, which is connected to that sixth realm. So really so fun to explore those. And the other thing about the Akashic record readings and just thinking about past lifetimes, which I find so potent with my clients, and particularly with my coaching clients who I see again and again, is that often those themes, those challenges, those wounds, and really themes that we come to coaching sessions for, or that we might be sparked to go to a reading for, are often products for sure of something that happened this line, like say a childhood wound, say a shadow that we accrued from childhood. But they're so hard to shed because they're not just from this lifetime, but also many lifetimes, which, right, the Akashic readings hold. And so it's like this lifetime, I don't know, maybe you always are attracted to someone who is withholding from you. That's a common one, right? Like someone's always dating people who aren't really giving. And that's always, let's say it's a man who just always picks women, you know, and yet that woman, the woman reminds him of, his mother in childhood who was always distracted because she was a single mother and trying to feed the kids, but then didn't give emotional attention, right? But then the person, has been to therapy, has done all the great work, the shadow work, all these things, and yet still can't shake it. It's like they've gone very deep, but I'll find like not fully to the root. And then I do a reading with them, and then it's like, oh, you've had three other lifetimes where that was the same theme. And then you can work on simply knowing the theme and then doing some kind of ritual. And that's why it's great to have a guide to help let it go from this lifetime and many lifetimes. And that's also the beauty of Akashic record readings. So, so sweet. Yeah. Okay, seventh round.
Oh, the seventh realm is just, this is where we experience whatever the word is for you. So it might be the divine, it might be source, it might be God. But to me, it is just pure love and light. It is just this energy of the highest vibration of love and light, and really where we all kind of want to be and where our soul feels at home. The first time I did a meditation going on this experience of the different realms, when I got to the seventh realm, I burst into tears, and I just felt
Mm,
so at home, and I didn't want to come back to the third. I was like, no, don't make me go, because it felt so familiar, so peaceful, so beautiful, and it's something
mm,
that I hope everyone has an opportunity to experience.
that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And so, so touching because I think probably when people, which I haven't really put this together, so thanks for making the synapse for me, like when I'm thinking about that seventh realm, pure love, pure consciousness, bliss is the word ananda in the Sanskrit yogic language and meditative traditions and Buddhism even, right? When we're in that field of love and source energy, that's probably what we experience when we die, because you hear of all those near death experiences. I've had near death experiences, but not that I didn't transition, go to the other side and come back. But many people write you the books and you'll hear the tales. If you haven't, Google them. They're amazing, right? Where people actually leave their body, pronounced dead, and then they return, and they return with these unbelievable experiences of, having seen relatives and light and love. But they get a glimpse, it's just occurring to me, of that seventh realm like you had in your meditation, right? Don't you think that's what they're seeing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have a personal story about this that my son experienced, and my understanding is that that love and light, that pure love that we experience is the seventh realm. That's the essence of our being. That is what we are born from, and that is what we return to.
Mm,
And so when we shed the ego, we shed the physical body, we shed the conscious mind, we shed all of that. That's all we are, is pure love and light.
mm. Ah, what a way to end the conversation. Thank you. And yeah, because it's a staircase, is how I think about it. And so if you think about it, on that seventh step, right, you're at the destination. You don't go back and say, oh, let me take two steps back and then go forward again, right? Like, if you're really, that's the landing point. And that was so, so gorgeous the way you described that. Love that. So, Marcy, would you be willing to share a pithy meditation, visualization, just something that taps us into our our intuitive body and our souls before we close out the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I know we didn't get to the question about, how do you know if you're a medium? And this
Yay. Okay,
I'm gonna
let's,
do I'm
yeah.
gonna well, I'm just gonna do a very, quick little exercise because everybody is a medium and everybody has that ability. And so we're just gonna tap into that a little bit very quickly.
I love that. I love that. And let's please though, thank you for grounding that. I'd love to see your astrological chart. Do you have like Taurus somewhere? You must.
Um, I don't
Grounding and
know
remembering
actually.
that.
I
I'll
don't
have to
know.
take a look at your chart. I'll have to do a chart reading for you. Yeah, just the fact that you anchored that back, and I'll actually see in my psychic mediumship, I'll see flashes of people's charts. Like I actually spirit, like I'll see someone's parts of people's charts just because I've been trained that way. Then that's how spirit talks to me because spirit only can communicate with you through your frame of reference, right? So that's why, like, to me, I'll see, not all the time, but I'll get downloads of astrology. Well, that's how my brain is hardwired. That's the software I have, right? And so every person has a different software. So they'll use what you know. And so pay attention to those insights, pay attention to those flashes, people. Don't think it's you making them up. If you just download it, if you just think it, that's claircognizance. It's you actually are downloading. But
Well,
would you speak before you leave? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to say something? I want
I
to
was I
hear
was
all
just
your
gonna
wisdom.
say that's one of the misconceptions about mediumship is that if you don't see spirit, in a very visual way, that you're not a medium. But we do. We have the knowing that could be that could be our strongest clair, and it is coming from somewhere else.
Love that. Thank you for calling that out. It's true. I have an episode on the clairs. So friends who are like, "What are the clairs?" or "What are those again?" I go through what's clairsentience, what's clairtangence, clairalience, clairgustance. There are all these different clairs, which are, our senses, but at the most heightened level. Bonnie Worth calls them the soul senses. The episode guest we had mentioned, who's so fabulous and a great psychic medium, and so it's how our, again, spirit only has, as Marcy said, us, right? It only has us to work with. And so, as she's saying, spirit then uses our senses to give us information. So we might taste something, we might smell something, we might just know something, claircognizance. And if you just get like, it feels like a bolt of like lightning to me. Like you just like have the thought, and the other thing is, if you're like, well, I have thoughts but I still can't separate them, have you breathed, have you opened, have you meditated, if you have it and you're curious, plug into source, do something that plugs you into source. Maybe it's taking a walk in nature, and then see if the information comes again, because spirit is persistent. So a way that we can know if it's our ego and our thoughts, and this is something I offer to my clients often, do something that plugs you into spirit and then see if it comes through. And if it comes through again and again and you're plugged in, then you can know for sure it's spirit. What can you tell people though before you're punctuating beautiful offering in the way of, how do I know if I'm a medium? What if someone's thinking that? Like, okay, I know I have some psychic stuff. I'm in tune with that. Again, everyone has those, but I'm aware of those. Okay, but there are going to be a lot of people listening, but like, am I a medium? Is it that? What are some signs, in your opinion, and things that can be a telltale experience of that?
Well, again, I think everyone's a medium to some extent, and again, whether we allow our ego to take a back seat long enough to understand that and realize it is a question. And of course, we always have free will, and mediumship, again, is connecting with other realms of consciousness, and I think we all have that ability. Some of us, of course, that ability is stronger. And so if you're having um, spiritual experiences, if you have spirit energy in your home, if you see spirit, if you know spirit, if you feel energy, if you feel the energy of other people, whether they're on this plane or on another plane, that can be another, telltale sign that you're sensitive to the energy, and so that you can dial into those frequencies. It's about removing some of the static and dialing into that frequency to connect and understand where those messages are coming from.
Yeah, helpful. Really, really helpful. Because again, that psychic mediumship, you're a translator. So just like Marcy's saying, if you can tune in your dial, like we back in the day growing up, right? We all had to tune in the dial. Some friends listening, it won't be because I even have a couple some teenagers who listen to this. But back in the day, when you have a dial, or you can think of like a flame on a stove, right? You got to get it at that right exact temperature, depending upon what you're cooking on a gas stove. Like Marcy's saying, once you tune in, then you're the translator and you're receiving, the energy because you've learned how to tune into to that exact station or that exact right amount of heat and flame. Thank you, Marcy. Okay. So, yeah, would you mind leading us in a little something?
Sure. So I invite you to close your eyes and just connect with your breath. Just take a moment to just be and just feel. And in your mind's eye, you're going to see a meadow. You're in the middle of this beautiful meadow surrounded by plants and grass and earth. Maybe you're barefoot and you feel the earth on your feet. And you're just taking in all of the senses. You feel the wind, you feel the sun on your skin, you hear the birds, you smell the flowers. And as you look up, you notice in the near distance, there's a beautiful gazebo. Maybe it's made out of crystals, maybe it's made out of ornate wood carvings, but it's this beautiful, inviting gazebo surrounded by an amazing, incredible garden of flowers and shrubs, trees and grasses. And as you look at the gazebo, you see a figure. Maybe they're sitting on a bench or a swing or a chair, and you feel the invitation to approach them. You slowly walk up to the gazebo and up the 7 stairs, one at a time. And when you reach the top stair, you realize that that figure sitting on the bench or on the chair is your loved one. This loved one who has passed. Again, it could be anyone from your spirit team, it could be anyone you're familiar with. You might be surprised at who's come to visit you at the gazebo. You embrace them in a warm hug. They invite you to sit down and talk. You might hear their voice. You might hear their laugh. You might smell their perfume or their cologne. They might want to share a message with you, or they might just want to listen. This is your time to connect with them. And when it's time to go, you stand up, and your loved one stands before you with their hands behind their back. Suddenly, and as if by complete magic, they bring their hands forward and open them to see what's inside. And what you see is your sign. This is the sign from your loved one. It might be a butterfly or a dragonfly or a specific type of flower or a coin, a dime, a penny, a feather, a specific type of bird. It could be anything. Your loved one gives the sign for you to take home. You thank them, hug them, and say goodbye, knowing that you can come back to the gazebo and visit them anytime. You head towards the stairs and very slowly descend down the 7 stairs one at a time. And you follow the path back to the meadow. And here you take a long, deep breath in, locking in the feelings, the emotions, the experience that you just had. Take a moment to ground yourself and come back into your physical body. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
Mm, that was luscious. Thank you so, so much.
You're very
Beautiful,
welcome.
Marcy. So it's amazing because when you started, and I wanted to articulate this for the listeners, I started hearing ringing in my right ear. That's an example of something that's always happened to me, never for long periods of time or anything. So as a kid, I just thought, oh, everyone hears like a little ringing sometimes, right? And it wasn't until I learned from a healer and a medium, no, that's spirit trying to talk with you. And that can be a sign to me that something's true in the other world. Like I'm connecting and that there's some truth being spoken. And so that has started to happen pretty soon after you started to speak. And I know you've shared with me, you get goosebumps a lot, right?
I do, yep.
So friends who are listening can know that, like a little ringing in the ear, little goosebumps. When those things happen, know that that can be spirit trying to wink at you, trying to get your attention, and pay attention to what's happening during that moment, because that's a way spirit can tap us on the back, metaphorically, so to speak. So, Marcy, where can folks find out about your work in this world?
Well, I'm on social media, Facebook and Instagram. They can visit my website at marcylee.ca and find me there. And yeah, I invite them to connect with me.
Do you want to spell your name for social?
Sure, it's Marcie, Marcielee. So Marcy Lee Healing on Facebook and Instagram, and marcylee.ca.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I am thrilled for my monthly Mystic members who are receiving some wonderful, wonderful goodies from Marcy. So she offered two things. Can you tell everyone about those for the Mystic members, please?
Sure. So the first one is a guided chakra balancing meditation, and it's just a guided meditation designed to, open and balance your energy centers. And, again, there may be experiences in terms of spirit that comes through with this meditation. It's very kind of healing and relaxing. So I'm happy to share that. And then the other thing is a 20% discount on any individual readings for your members.
Amazing. So, and Marcy does Akashic readings, and she has three different types of readings. So you can check out those her different readings for sure. She's wonderful, and I'm so happy. So thank you for that generous offer for my monthly Mystic members. If you're not a Mystic member yet, head on over and Carpe Diem, supporting your body, mind, and heart. Modernmist.love. I've got a library of videos that are mindfulness based meditations, alignment based yoga. So make your body feel good, learn how to meditate with all different techniques. There's mystic hacks on there where I teach people how to work with energy, tarot videos, astrology videos. People love those, all those. So it's like an adult playground. So for $33 a month only, you can go over there. If you love this podcast, you can support it that way, or go over to my Patreon page. So that's on Patreon. Just look up Modern Mystic. And what else? Oh, I also offer astrology readings. I call them astrology, psyche, soul map readings, psychic medium readings, and also my Vibrant Venus Elite coaching. So you can come be a part of my coaching sessions where I offer intuitive and mediumship guidance in addition to an arsenal of different things. So please remember to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast because it really does help sustain it and keep it going. And it also, of course, supports getting important wisdom heard more and more by people like with Marcy today. What else? I think covered everything. So I just, Marcy, thank you so much for being here and being authentic, for sharing so many things, but really in such a concrete way. So I have to see your chart because I just feel like a lot of what you offer is very grounded, which is why I was attracted to you, and very concrete. So there has to be a bunch of earth energy in there, which I love people with earth energy because I have very little. And and I just really celebrate your work in this world and you helping pushing the envelope of collective consciousness and mediumship and psychic abilities in a spirit of normalcy, that this is something that's really, really normal and how we can integrate it into really everyday life because we can. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and that is one of my goals is to talk about spirit around the dinner table. I always say, if we can't have conversations about the spirits that are visiting us in our home, then, that's a bit of a red flag. So, thank you for the opportunity to share today and be a part of this incredible and amazing podcast.
Namaste.